Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. There's a new flashpoint in the India-China tussle. Yesterday, India conducted a major missile test. Apparently, there was a Chinese ship close by. It was watching the launch from the high seas. So is China snooping on India's missile test? It is the same alibi as always. China claims the ship is a research vessel. But what was it doing near India's test site? We'll try to answer this question and join the dots for you. A dead whistleblower and a criminal probe are adding to plane manufacturer Boeing's troubles. We'll tell you how India's aviation sector could also be impacted. Ahead of the US election, President Joe Biden has unveiled a $7.3 trillion spending wish list. In Nepal, thousands have taken to the streets to demand a return of the monarchy. And finally, we'll tell you why a majority of the US teens want to get rid of their smartphones. That story and much more coming up. Let's start with the headlines. Indian troops begin withdrawing from the Maldives amid strained ties. Maldives' new pro-China president had asked the troops to leave. More than 80 Indian troops will withdraw from the archipelago by the 10th of May. In September, President Muizu came to power in the Maldives on an anti-India platform. India's National Security Advisor meets Israeli Prime Minister. The meeting in Jerusalem focused on the Gaza war. Ajit Doval and Benjamin Netanyahu also spoke about efforts to release the hostages and the need for humanitarian aid. Israel's Gaza offensive has killed more than 30,000 Palestinians. Haiti's Prime Minister Ariel Henry resigns. It comes as regional leaders held an emergency meeting in Jamaica. In recent weeks, Haiti has been rocked by widespread violence. Armed gangs who now control the capital wanted the unelected Prime Minister to step down. Romania detains Andrew Tate on a UK arrest warrant. The controversial influencer was arrested over sex offence charges. A Bucharest court will now decide on Tate's extradition to the UK. He's under investigation in Romania as well on charges of rape and human trafficking. An Airbnb bans security cameras inside guest homes. The home rental platform says it wants to prioritize privacy. Earlier, Airbnb allowed indoor security cameras in the common areas, but there have been several complaints about hidden cameras in Airbnb lodgings. We begin with the story of Agni-5. India's latest missile. It was tested yesterday and it was a big win for India. But now it turns out that China may have been snooping on India when the test was on. The mission was called Divyastra, meaning a divine weapon. Guess who was around to witness it? An uninvited guest, a Chinese ship that Beijing calls a research vessel. This ship is called Xiangyang-Hong-1. Reports say it was in the Bay of Bengal region. It entered these waters just before India's missile test. The ship was spotted less than 260 nautical miles off the coast of Visakhapatnam. India conducted its tests here on the APJ Abdul Kalam Island off the Odisha coast. As you can clearly see, the Chinese ship was in the vicinity of India's test site. But what was it doing there? This so-called research vessel did not reveal where it was going or what it was up to. As far as we know, the Chinese did not announce that they'll be sending the ship, but Beijing's intentions are quite obvious. This ship was probably there to monitor the test, collect whatever data it could, because this launch was a major milestone for India, a significant breakthrough. India tested a new weapons technology. It's called MIRV. Multiple Independently Targetable Re-Entry Vehicle, MIRV. Now, this is basically a missile equipped with multiple warheads. It can hit a range of targets in a single strike, and there is a good reason for China to be watching this closely to seek more information about India's launch, because this missile will serve as nuclear deterrence against countries like China and Pakistan. China already has this weapons technology, so does Russia, the United States, France, and the United Kingdom. Yesterday, India joined this elite club. And like any military expert will tell you, it pays to know the strengths and weaknesses of your rival. So China may label it as research, But what it's doing is classic espionage. And it's being quite invasive and brazen about it. We keep telling you about these Chinese research ships. They're becoming quite a nuisance. They keep showing up in India's neighborhood. In October last year, a Chinese ship docked in Colombo, the capital of Sri Lanka. Last month, China sent a ship to the Maldives, their new BFF in the region. And now it's turned up in the Bay of Bengal. The equipment on these research ships is designed for dual use, meaning it has both civilian and military applications. And that is why this is a cause of concern. And this is not happening, like I said, for the first time. There was another incident in 2022. It happened in November. India was planning a missile test. It had put out a NOTAM. NOTAM is Notice to Air Missiles. It is basically like a warning telling plane operators and pilots and air traffic operators to avoid a certain area in the skies. These notices are used to enforce a no-fly zone before a missile test so that pilots can keep their planes away from the test site. But guess who could not stay away? The Chinese and their research ships. Reports say just before India's test, the Chinese dispatched a research ship. It was seen in the Indian Ocean. And how did India react? It withdrew the original notice and issued a fresh one, this time to institute a no-fly zone over the Bay of Bengal. Ultimately, the test went ahead. So India is keeping an eye on the Chinese, but the challenges will keep coming. Last week, the Indian Prime Minister visited Arunachal Pradesh. The trip has caused outrage in Beijing.
The area of Zangnan is Chinese territory. The Chinese government has never recognized the so-called Arunachal Pradesh, illegally set up by India, and firmly opposes it. India's moves will only complicate the boundary question and disrupt the situation in the border areas between the two countries. China strongly deplores and firmly opposes the Indian leader's visit to the east section of the China-India boundary. We have made solemn representations to India.
China's protest has no basis. Arunachal Pradesh is an integral part of India, but the Chinese keep claiming the Indian state as theirs, even when these claims have no international backing. New Delhi has lodged a counter-protest. India's statement has rejected China's claim. So the back and forth continues, both on the land border and the high seas. There's more trouble for Boeing. A criminal investigation, a failed audit, a dead whistleblower, and multiple mid-air mishaps. It's basically Murphy's Law in action. Everything that can go wrong is going wrong. Let's start with the latest. A Boeing whistleblower has been found dead in the US. His name is John Barnett. Now, Barnett worked at Boeing for 32 years. He flagged many safety issues on their planes, specifically in the oxygen system. He said the onboard masks had a 25% failure rate. So 1 out of 4 masks may not work. He also accused Boeing of using substandard parts. Of course, the company denied this, but later probes upheld Barnett's claims. So how did he die? Barnett was in South Carolina for the Boeing case. He was to appear for questioning on Saturday, but he did not turn up. When officials went looking, they found him dead inside his truck. It was parked at his hotel's car park. And cause of death? Apparently self-inflicted wounds. Now, this whole incident is very fishy. Barnett was on a crusade to expose Boeing. Why would he take his life? Why would he just give up on his mission? Only a thorough investigation can give us the answers. But for Boeing, the headline is bad enough. Plus, it comes at the worst possible time for them. You may remember the mid-air incident from January. A Boeing plane's door panel just flew off while the plane was mid-air. After that, the US FAA decided to investigate Boeing's production process. A quick side note, the FAA is the Federal Aviation Authority. It is America's aviation watchdog. As part of their probe, they conducted 89 tests. Guess how many Boeing failed? 33 out of 89. That's a 37% failure rate. Not bad for a homemade toy plane, but for a real one, 37% is borderline metal coffin. Boeing supply did equally bad. That's Spirit Aerosystems. They make the fuselage for Boeing's MAX planes, and Spirit failed 7 out of 13 audits. 7 out of 13, they failed. One of them involved the door panel, the exact part that flew off mid-air in January. So what is Boeing doing about all of this? The company says it is implementing immediate changes. It is making a plan to strengthen its safety and quality. And what is the US government doing? After all, they cleared these planes to fly. Reports say the US Justice Department has opened a criminal investigation. Again, the focus is on the January incident. All of this compounds Boeing's problems. It's already a company in crisis. Just look at the share prices. In March 2019, Boeing shares were worth $378. And now, just $192. That's a 50% drop in 5 years. If you think this problem is only Boeing's, you're wrong. The problem affects all of us because aviation is a duopoly, meaning two companies dominate this market, America's Boeing and Europe's Airbus. Together, they make up 99% of all large planes, plus 90% of the overall industry, two companies. This closed nature extends to supplies as well. For example, very few companies make engines for planes, like Pratt & Whitney and General Electricals. So what happens if one of them fails? Or if one of their planes is temporarily grounded? Or if one of the engines runs into a problem? The whole industry will be disrupted. It can happen in two ways. One is delivery issues. Let's look at Indian carriers. A lot of them have placed orders from Boeing. Akasa Air is buying 150 planes, Air India is buying 220 planes, and Indigo is looking to buy 25 planes. These aircraft will drive their domestic and international expansion. But what if safety issues delay that? It could cost a lot of money. The second problem is plane renting costs. You see, airlines do not buy planes all the time. Sometimes they lease them. But that cost is rising fast. Take the Airbus A320 plane. It's a workhorse of the aviation world. A 10-year lease on that plane costs $117,000 per month. It is 14% higher than last year. Same with Boeing 737-800. Another workhorse of the aviation world. Its lease rate is 13% up compared to last year. The question is why? A, because demand is rising, more people are flying than ever before, and B, because of supply shortage. Let's go back to that January mid-air incident. The plane involved in that incident was a Boeing 737 MAX 9. Now that model is still grounded in many countries. So what do carriers do when those planes are grounded? They have to look elsewhere for planes. And that is the danger of a duopoly. It's just one step away from a monopoly, a situation where the supplier can dictate price and supply. If that happens, it's bad news for customers. Prices of planes will rise, leasing costs will rise, and carriers will dump that burden on us. So what is the solution? At this point, there isn't one, honestly. You see, making planes requires a lot of capital. You can't just randomly enter the market. Plus, Boeing and Airbus know all the right people. They're in bed with regulators across the world. So this duopoly is not some organic market development. It's a carefully crafted system, one that keeps aviation dependent on Western producers. It's budget season all over the world, and on Monday, Joe Biden unveiled his, a $7.3 trillion spending wish list. Now, normally a budget is a policy document, but this is election year in the US, so Joe Biden's budget is not just about policy. It's also a campaign pitch, a sneak peek into what a second Biden term could look like. We'll bring you the top 3 highlights. Number 1, more tax on the rich. Biden wants to raise corporate tax from 21 to 28%. He's also targeting the top 0.1%. That's Americans worth over $100 million. Biden wants them to pay 25% in taxes. Now, this has been a big liberal demand to increase taxes on America's ultra-rich. And Joe Biden is now promising to do that. Highlight number 2, more spending on Social Security. Again, a liberal demand. Biden wants subsidies on childcare and college. He also wants to spend $258 billion on building houses. Another proposal is paid family leave. It could cover 12 weeks for a variety of reasons, like to look after family members or to recover from illness. And finally, highlight number 3, controlling defense spending. Joe Biden plans to increase military spending by just 1%. He wants to buy fewer F-35 jets and submarines. Now, this budget is all about 2 things. 1 is catering to his Democratic voter base, and 2, differentiating himself from Donald Trump.
But guess what? But I'm a capitalist, man. Make all the money you want. Just begin to pay your fair share of taxes. The last administration enacted a $2 trillion tax cut. $2 trillion tax cut that benefits the very wealthy in the top 1%. The biggest corporations, and exploded the federal deficit. Last administration added more to the national debt than any presidential term in American history.
When will this budget be passed? Well, that's the thing. Chances are it won't be passed. You see, the US House is controlled by the Republicans. They oppose many of Biden's proposals, so do not expect this budget to be passed. Even last year it wasn't. Instead, the US government is functioning on interim funding, sort of like a stopgap measure. But I must say one thing here. Biden's budget is very myopic in the current context. It focuses more on the election. Why else would you curb defense spending now? In the middle of 2 wars? In the middle of a standoff with China? Because geopolitics can wait, elections cannot. That's why he's doing what he's doing, at least proposing it. The same applies to Biden's foreign policy. His support for Israel is changing slightly. Reports say Biden has issued a warning to Benjamin Netanyahu. If you invade Rafah, military aid will stop. And that is a major warning. The US gives some $3 billion to Israel every year. If that aid stops, it could mean trouble. But why has Biden issued this warning now? Because his support for Israel is hurting him. Muslim Americans are threatening to abandon him in the next election. They want him to stop the war in Gaza. Just one problem, though. Biden wants to appease both sides. There are 3.5 million Muslims in the United States. And how many Jews? Around 8 million. So Joe Biden does not want to abandon either camp. The result is a confused policy. On the one hand, Biden is blocking UN Security Council resolutions against Israel. On the other, he's pushing for a ceasefire himself. Do you see the confusion here? Biden wants to appease both sides, Muslims and Jews, and in the process, he's getting nothing done. It tells you how high the stakes are. Joe Biden faces a tough path to re-election. Just look at the poll numbers. Trump has a 1.4% lead over Biden. Most polls put the former president ahead now. So Biden is pulling out all the stops. His State of the Union address was a campaign speech. His new budget is a campaign promise. And his policy on Israel is neither here nor there. China is having money problems too. Its provinces and local governments are out of cash. They need some debt relief and they need it fast. Now, this story came out a few days ago. Officials from indebted regions were in Beijing. They were from 2 provinces, Liaoning and Hebei, along with representatives from the city of Tianjin. They participated in a series of crisis meetings. Leading bankers from state-owned banks were also present. In these meetings, local government officials made some requests to the bankers. They wanted their debt payments renegotiated. They wanted their loans to be restructured and refinanced. Basically, they were looking for ways to avoid a potential default. And this risk of default is real. China's local governments face a mountain of debt. Do you know how much money they owe? A whopping $13 trillion. This is according to Goldman Sachs. The IMF has a different estimate, the International Monetary Fund. They say Chinese local governments owe anywhere between $7 and $11 trillion. This year alone, loans worth $400 billion need to be settled. So the clock is ticking, and it has been like that for a while. But Beijing has been reluctant to deal with this problem until it became too big to ignore. So last year, Beijing dispatched a team of experts. They traveled to the provinces, 10 provinces and cities, the weakest of the lot financially. And these experts went over their books and reported their findings to Beijing. Then last week, the Chinese premier spoke. He promised to take action.
We will develop government debt management mechanisms that meet the needs of high-quality development. We will enhance our capacity for preventing and controlling financial risks.
China's finance minister agrees with the premier. He's confident that this debt bubble can be contained. But what is China's plan? How will they pay off the trillions of dollars of debt? Their economy is valued at over $18 trillion. The Chinese economy, more than $18 trillion. Local governments owe at least $7 trillion, and that's the most conservative estimate. The worst case scenario is some $13 trillion in debt. That's over 70% of China's GDP. Clearly, Beijing does not have this kind of money lying around, so how will it repay the debt? In January, Beijing offered some solutions to local governments. A program was launched to replace old debt with new low-interest government bonds. Beijing also told banks to reduce interest rates and to extend the maturity date on some loans. So Beijing is trying to buy time, basically. It is dealing with the debt by cleaning up the books and by delaying the repayments. But it was not proving to be enough, which is why local government officials sought direct intervention from the bankers in Beijing. Thankfully, there has been no default so far, and Beijing is taking steps to prevent one. But these efforts are adding to the stress on the Chinese economy. Take the case of Yunnan. It's a province in China. In 2022, this province owed 1.2 trillion yuan. That's over $130 billion. That was their debt. Now, this debt has led to other problems. Earlier, Yunnan was funding more than 1,000 projects, including new highways and theme parks. Now, all these projects stand suspended. And this is a problem for the Chinese economy. Its growth is tied to infrastructure investment. It is the main vehicle that drove China's rise, infra investment. It is also what created this massive pile of debt. When the economy was booming, China encouraged local governments to take loans and build more infrastructure even when they did not need it. This debt fueled a rapid expansion of China's economy, but today it has become the country's biggest liability. In India, there's more trouble for Byju's. The edtech giant has vacated its offices across the country. Only one office is functional, and that's the headquarters in Bengaluru. 14,000 employees have been asked to work from home. Byju says it's part of a restructuring plan, but this is more likely about cost cutting. Byju's is out of money. 75% of the employees have not received a part of their salary from last month, February. And funds are stuck in a very public dispute with investors. It looks like the company is pulling all stops. But will that be enough for it to survive? Here's a report.
In 2023, Byju's had around 100 offices in India. As of today, it has only one, its headquarters in Bengaluru. The edtech giant has vacated all its office spaces. Employees have been asked to work from home, 14,000 of them. It's not a sudden process. Reports suggest it's been happening for some time now. It's part of the company's restructuring plan. These rental spaces were on contract. Once the leases ran out, Byju's did not renew it. The aim was to cut costs. However, the tuition centers are still running. Byju's has 300 of them. They are in-person coaching centers. Those will still be running. The move comes as Byju's struggles with cash flow. In the month of February, salaries were delayed. They were later dispersed, but 75% of the employees have only received a part of it. Byju's is reportedly struggling to repay a $1.2 billion loan. The company was depending on its $200 million rights issue. This was to raise capital and meet costs. But that remains stuck right now because of a tussle with investors. Byju Ravindran says a group of investors have blocked the funds. This has rendered it unavailable for business purposes. The case will be heard in April. But that's not the only trouble for the founder. Last month, Byju's major stakeholders voted to remove Byju Ravindran. They wanted to strip him of his CEO tag. But Byju Ravindran moved the courts. They ruled in his favor. He's still the CEO, but the question is, for how long? How long can Byju's survive? Multiple petitions have already been filed against the company. This is with the Company Law Tribunal. They want one thing, to begin insolvency proceedings. Basically declare that the edtech giant is bankrupt. Even law enforcement is involved now. The ED, or the Enforcement Directorate, has issued a lookout notice against the founder. Byju's was once the poster child of Indian startups. In 2022, it was valued at $22 billion. They once signed Lionel Messi as their brand ambassador. But troubles soon emerged. A hiring spree during the pandemic, bad financial health, a toxic work culture, and shady governance practices raised questions. Since then, the company has lost 95% of its valuation. Byju's is worth around $1 billion right now. Its offices are being vacated. There have been multiple layoffs. Salaries are delayed. Investors want Baiju Ravindran out. Shareholders have lost confidence. And Byju's is selling its business units to raise money. It's quite a dramatic fall for Byju's and a cautionary tale. A lesson on how organizations shouldn't be run.
When people protest, you tend to feel for them, even feel obliged to support them. But in Nepal's case, we don't. Thousands of Nepalese have hit the streets of Kathmandu. They're marching and shouting slogans. And what do they want? To bring back the monarchy. Let me repeat that. Nepalese protesters want to abolish their republic. They want the former king to rule Nepal.
Our country will retain its value and identity only if it is turned back to a monarchy and the king is reinstated back to the throne.
For the continuation of Nepal and Nepali people, we need a monarchy. Without a king, we have no identity as Nepalese, and all of us might as well just declare ourselves as refugees.
Now, we've seen the opposite many times. People protesting to remove the king is quite common. Even Nepal had a similar movement. Until 2005, it was a constitutional monarchy. But the last king, Gyanendra, had other plans. He dismissed the parliament, he jailed politicians and journalists, he declared an emergency and captured absolute power. That's when public protests broke out in Nepal. Thousands of people hit the streets demanding the king's abdication. And in 2006, he relented. The king transferred power to the parliament. 2 years later, the monarchy was abolished. Today, King Gyanendra lives like a commoner. He rarely makes public appearances or comments. So why do protesters want him back? Because they feel democracy has not delivered. And you can't really blame them. Nepal's democratic journey began in 2008. Since then, they've had 13 governments. That's 13 governments in 16 years. Parties keep splitting. Coalition partners keep changing, and so do prime ministers. Just look at what happened earlier this month. Nepal's prime minister changed his coalition partner. He dumped the Nepali Congress. He then allied with a faction of the Communist Party, the CPN, Unified Marxist-Leninist. That's the faction of former Prime Minister Palki Sharma Oli. Now, fun fact, this new coalition is not exactly new. It's the same equation of 2022. In November that year, general elections were held. Pushp Kamal Dahal, or Prachand as he's better known, wanted to be Prime Minister. But his ally, the Nepali Congress, did not agree. So what did he do? He joined hands with Oli's faction. A few months later, he changed his mind. He dumped Oli's faction and went with the Nepali Congress. This was in March 2023. 1 year later, he's changed again, dumped Nepali Congress and joined hands with Oli's faction. I know it is confusing even to hear all of this. So imagine living through it. This is the third coalition since 2022. It's the textbook definition of instability, and instability leads to mismanagement. Let me show you some numbers. Nepal's GDP grew by just 1.9% in the last financial year. Inflation was around 7.7% and unemployment around 11%. It's actually much higher in the 15 to 29 age group. That's nearly 20% unemployment. In fact, most Nepalese youth are leaving their country. They want to live and work abroad. Consider the first 7 months of the last financial year, around 400,000 Nepalese left the country. That's almost 1,900 people every day leaving. It's a huge number for a country of 30 million people. So the resentment is justified. But do remember one thing. It's not democracy or republicanism that has failed. It's the politicians of Nepal. That distinction is very important. Restoring the monarchy will not help Nepal. The idea that only a king can preserve national identity is wrong. After all, most countries do not have a king. Does that mean they do not have a national identity? Of course not. The problem here is that there are royalists within the democratic setup, like the Rashtriya Prajatantra Party. It was founded in the 1990s by the king's allies. Today it has 14 seats in Nepal's parliament, which is 5% of the total. Now, this party is leading the movement to restore the monarchy. I'm sure they have their own vested interest in doing so, but it's important that Nepal's people reject it. If your democracy does not work, do not replace it. Just replace the people running it. Now let's look at South Korea, the land of K-pop, K-dramas, and now a medical crisis. South Korea's trainee doctors are on strike. There are about 12,000 who are protesting. The strike has now entered its fourth week and there's no end in sight. In fact, it may get worse. Now, medical college professors are threatening to quit. They say they will step down if their striking trainees are punished. It puts the government in a tough spot. Seoul has begun suspending medical licenses. So if it goes through with this punishment, the crisis could escalate. The government has already brought in the military. They've asked military physicians to cover for the striking doctors. But how sustainable is this solution? Here's our report.
South Korea is facing a medical crisis. 93% of its medical trainees are on strike. Almost 12,000 trainee doctors haven't been showing up for work. The doctors are protesting against a government initiative. Seoul wants to increase the intake of medical students. The South Korean government believes that there will be a doctor shortage soon because the country is rapidly aging. Therefore, more healthcare professionals will be required in the years to come. So the government wants to increase the number of doctors in the country by increasing the student intake. They want 2,000 more students every year starting from 2025. But the current trainee doctors believe that this is unfair. They think more students will lower the quality of medical education. They also think the additional doctors will lead to a reduction in pay because of more competition in the market. South Korea's trainee doctors want the government to raise their wages first, and that is what has led to the present standoff. The doctors' strike has entered its fourth week, and it's starting to take a toll on the country's healthcare system. Surgeries have been cancelled, wait times have been increased, and treatments have been delayed. To provide support to its hospitals, South Korea's government has now turned to the military. Yesterday, it deployed 20 military surgeons and 138 public health doctors. They've been sent to 20 hospitals across the country for an initial period of 4 weeks. More military personnel may be deployed soon. Military hospitals have also been opened up to the general public, and nurses have been given permission to perform some medical procedures reserved for doctors. But these are stopgap measures at best, because South Korea is short by 12,000 medical professionals at the moment. And more may be on their way out.
어제 서울의대 교수협의회
There was a media report on Seoul National University Medical Professors Emergency Committee resolution to submit resignations en masse. I deeply regret and want to express deep concern over the decision as it poses serious threats on patients' lives and health. The professors must work with the government to urge trainee doctors return to hospitals.
진료를 거부한 전공의들이 환자 곁으로 돌아오도록 지혜를 모아야 할 것입니다.
Medical professors are standing by their pupils. They say that if the trainee doctors are punished, they will resign. Seoul has already threatened the striking doctors with punitive action. The government said it would revoke their medical licenses. The process has begun. About 5,000 doctors have received suspension notices. More notices are expected to follow. This is a pressure tactic. The government also promised leniency to doctors who return to work. But it seems the plan backfired. Today, professors from 33 of South Korea's 40 medical colleges passed a resolution. They have threatened collective action, which has left the government scrambling again. No trainee doctors is bad enough. No medical professors would be a disaster. It's now a game of who blinks first, the government or the doctors. And all this while lives hang in the balance. Ordinary South Koreans are suffering. So for their sake, this standoff needs to end, and cooler heads need to prevail.
Our next story is from Nigeria. Last week, we told you about a kidnapping. Almost 300 students were taken from their school during morning assembly. This was last Thursday. The children still haven't been found and no group has taken responsibility yet, but the kidnappers are expected to demand a large ransom for their release. Now, if this was happening on your watch, what would you do? Send out the army? Go meet the families of the victims? Set up base in the affected town until the children are found? All good options. But Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu has different ideas. He did fly out yesterday, but he landed about 150 kilometers south of the affected village. He went to a different state. Why? To inaugurate an airport that has been renamed after him. So amid a spree of kidnappings, Nigeria's president chooses to inaugurate the Bola Tinubu airport. A crisis is unfolding under his nose, but Tinubu is busy cutting ribbons, which begs the question, how tone-deaf can you be? How can you ignore the plight of your citizens? These are some families from Kuriga, the village where the children were kidnapped.
We plead with the government to help us. We don't have any security in this community, no police outpost, no military presence, and no local vigilante. We are responsible for our own security, so anytime they want, they will invade the community and do whatever they feel like doing.
We don't know what to do, but we believe in God. We don't have security, no soldiers, no police to protect the school.
This problem we are facing, we are crying, looking for help from the government and God. But it is the gunmen that will decide to bring the children back.
They say they haven't received any help from the government. They're at the mercy of the bandits and they're anxiously waiting to get their children back. In this situation, inaugurating an airport seems absurd. Now, the Nigerian government will say that they are on top of things. They have reportedly deployed the army. They're apparently working with the Air Force and local vigilante groups as well. But so far, there have been no updates on the whereabouts of the children. Meanwhile, there have been more kidnappings. On Saturday, 15 more school children were taken, this time in the country's far north. In another case, kidnappers have come out with their ransom demand. This is for 16 people who were kidnapped on the 28th of February. The kidnappers allegedly want 14 trillion naira. That's about 25 billion US dollars. Of course, that's a ridiculous amount, but it shows the impunity of the kidnappers. They've been getting bolder over the last few months. Since Tinubu came to power last May, an estimated 4,500 people have been kidnapped across the country. This is according to a consultancy based in Lagos in southern Nigeria. 4,500 kidnappings in the last 9 months on Tinubu's watch. It adds to his growing list of scandals. He's appointed his son-in-law to a high government post. His economic policies have caused the naira to crash. The people have been suffering with rising inflation and now kidnappings are rampant again. Amid all this chaos, Tinubu chooses to put his name on an airport. It shows his misplaced priorities and utter lack of tact. Our next story is about climate change. It's affecting everything, including fruits. The latest victim is the banana. Banana prices are on the rise. Experts say it's because of global warming. In February, a dozen bananas were selling for 80 rupees in India's Mumbai. In Bengaluru, a kilogram cost 100 rupees. Compare that to the average rate. It's around 20 to 30 rupees per kilo. So the prices are truly going bananas. And as the planet warms, it could become worse. Our next report tells you why the world's most popular fruit could be in danger.
In the annals of culinary history, few fruits hold as much sway as the humble banana. From its origins in the jungles of Southeast Asia to its global conquest as the world's most popular fruit, the banana has come a long way. It's enjoyed by millions of people across the globe. But will that journey end soon? If you're a minion, this could be disastrous news. Banana prices are going bananas, and scientists say climate change is to blame. Bananas primarily grow in tropical regions, which means it has specific temperature and humidity requirements. But climate change has disrupted that. Rising temperatures, altered rainfall patterns, and increased warm weather events have led to a decline in banana yields. Then there are pests and diseases. Once a plantation gets infected, it's very difficult to save. All banana plants are killed. and the rising temperatures are making it susceptible to more diseases, like Fusarium wilt TR4. It emerged in Australia, moved to Asia, and now is in South America. It's threatening the Cavendish banana, which is the world's favorite variety. All of this makes banana plantations vulnerable. Harvests are reducing and prices are going up. Take India, for example. Here, the average cost for a kilogram of bananas is 20 to 30 rupees. India is the largest producer of bananas in the world. It produces 33 million tons of bananas every year. But last month, prices saw a huge spike. In Mumbai, a dozen bananas were selling for 80 rupees. In Bengaluru, a kilogram was selling for 100 rupees. And it's not just India. In the United Kingdom, shops are experiencing shortages. Argentina is running low on the fruit. Russians have been told to grow their own bananas. Floods have devastated banana plantations in Australia. In Venezuela, a banana fungus is affecting plantations. So the humble fruit is under attack across the globe. So what's the solution? That was the topic of discussion at the World Banana Forum. Yes, that's a thing. The body met in Rome this week. They discussed the challenges affecting the fruit. Everything was on the table, from price hike to sustainability. The UN body is still to come up with a concrete solution. They're only discussing stopgap measures for now. But here's a sobering reminder. Climate change is affecting all aspects of our lives, from the way we live to the food we eat. And unless we address the root cause of global warming, your favorite fruit will remain under threat.
Now let's talk about a modern dilemma: smartphones. Should children be using smartphones? How long should they be kept away from these devices? Should teens be on social media? What kind of content should they see? From policymakers to parents, adults everywhere are boggled. They think of mobile phones as a Pandora's box that can unleash all kinds of evil. But to most children, these metal blocks are flashy toys. By the age of 3, about 40% children are already using mobile phones the world over. And by the time children hit their teen years, most of them have smartphones. Soon these bricks go from being favorite toys to prized possessions, even an addiction. 50% of teens globally are addicted to mobile phones. And here's the thing with addiction. After a point, it can be sickening. And maybe that's what's happening in this case as well. A new survey is out and its findings will surprise you. It says that American teenagers are sick of their smartphones. Nearly 3/4 of them feel happy without their phones. That's 3 out of 4 teenagers. They say they're more at peace without their phones, at least theoretically. Because despite this feedback, they've not limited their phone usage. Only 36% American teens have cut back on using their devices. Most teens are still spending more than 8 hours a day on smartphones, 8 hours in a day. 45% teens are constantly on the internet. They say despite the downsides, phones help them tremendously. 69% say smartphones help them pursue hobbies. 65% say smartphones make them creative. 45% say phones help them do well in school. Plus, children need phones to contact their parents. They use phones to make payments, so smartphones have their upside, and teens see that. But the pros do not outweigh the cons. Mobile phones are fueling a mental health crisis across the world. 4 in 10 teens feel anxious and lonely without their smartphones. They're struggling with poor attention spans. 80% teens check their phones every hour. They get 237 or more notifications each day. Then there is social media and its harmful messaging. Online bullying, harassment, and sexual exploitation. 46% adolescents say social media makes them feel worse about their body image. 64% are exposed to hate-based content. Did you know that children are even buying drugs on social media, or that child sex images are more widely available than ever before? There are 36 million pornographic images of children on social media, but whether teenagers see these downsides or not, the adults must. And in the past few months, it seems like they have been taking note. Last year, more than 40 states in the US sued Meta, 40 American states. The parent company of Instagram and Facebook, it was sued. for contributing to the youth mental health crisis. This year, the CEOs of Meta, TikTok and other social media companies were grilled. They went before the American Senate and testified about harms to young people. Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg was made to apologize yet again.
I'm sorry for everything that you've all been through. It's terrible. No one should have to go through the things that your families have suffered.
While this goes on, policymakers have been using harsher language. They've called Meta the world's, and I'm quoting, the world's single largest marketplace for pedophiles. They say children are trafficked on its platforms and that social media is a public health hazard. I'm quoting here, an environmental toxin. That's because it designs platforms with addictive features. Some US states, the UK, Canada and the EU have passed laws to reduce children's exposure to harmful content. Meanwhile, almost 1 in 4 countries have banned smartphones in schools. In India, we do not have a nationwide ban, but most state governments and schools ban smartphones. So steps are being taken across the board, albeit at a slow pace. Will teenagers boost this progress? The survey is encouraging, but we'll have to see if they walk the talk. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. In India, Prime Minister Narendra Modi oversees the tri-service Bharat Shakti exercise in Pokhran. In Indonesia, citizens gather to mark the beginning of Ramadan. And in Australia, AI companions are helping people living with dementia at care homes. We're also taking you back in history. On this day in 1930, Mahatma Gandhi started the Dandi March. He walked from Sabarmati Ashram to the town of Dandi for 24 days. Gandhi and his followers defied the British salt laws by producing salt from the sea. It was part of Gandhi's civil disobedience movement. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Where we can appreciate the diverse and vibrant nature of the world around us. These children have a unique ability to live in the present, to simply enjoy themselves without the burdens of the past or the worries of the future.
Like music and dancing.
Oh my dear, you've hit the nail on the head. Music and dancing, they truly are the language of the soul. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you.
Okay, I'm going to do a small intro and then I'll start off.
Answer to your question is no, I didn't think so. There's so many things that go along with it. The first thing that we are judged on is the way that we look.
Oh my god.
How you said hi to someone and why you said hi like that, and there are so many people looking up to you and so many kids wanting to do what you're doing or be like you. The obsession we have also with men. I mean, Salman Khan has still asked when he's going to get married. So it's not a woman issue. This came from your heart. I think when we walk into a room, the first thing that we are judged on is the way that we look. How I'm sitting with you when this camera is not rolling is very different to how I sit with you when the camera is rolling. But I have anxiety of meeting new people. I mean, a lot of people don't know this about me, but I have anxiety of meeting new people. Can you believe that? And the way my life turned out and panned out, till date, if I walk into a room where my name is going to be announced, and I go to an event and my name is going to be announced, and I know that everybody's going to turn around and look at me, it gives me anxiety. So I've never really spoken about this. So imagine from a person like that, like in school, I used to know the answers to every single question, but I never put my hand up because I didn't want people to turn and look at me.
Oh my God.
Because I had anxiety from it. I was like, oh my God, everybody's going to look at me. And I knew I knew the right answer. So that's the person that I really am. And then my life turned out the way that I did, where I became this public speaker. And so I've actually had to train myself to become this person.
But how does it work when you get on a tennis court then? I mean, because everyone's watching you, your skills are being judged,
So at that moment, actually when I play tennis is when I'm the most fearless. And honestly, none of that mattered when I walked onto the tennis court. When I walked onto the tennis court, it didn't matter to me what people said, what people did, whether they watched or they didn't watch. For me, playing and trying to win and being the best version of myself out there trumped everything else. And that is the only time I didn't feel that anxious energy, where I would be like, oh my God, I'm going to walk on the court and people are going to look at me. I didn't care. But if you tell me to walk into a restaurant, till date, I swear to you, if I have to go to a restaurant that is in this part of the world where I know for a fact that I will get recognized, it gives me, I'm not saying it gives me anxiety where I won't enter the restaurant, but it gives me butterflies in my stomach where I'm like, oh my God, I have to enter this restaurant. It's almost like a thing that I fight with on a daily basis within my system.
So are you also embarrassed with compliments?
Yeah, very. I'm so bad. Anybody that knows me, when they start complimenting, I'm like, stop talking about me. I'm sitting right here. Don't talk about me. So that also comes from that, right? That's a personality trait also, because it's connected to this. So I don't like compliments at all. I would like to say that the moment I became number one in the world, and it's a very hard choice to make because there were a lot of moments where I felt that. But I think that when you become number one in the world at what you do and what you've dreamt of all your life, I remember times when, there were a lot of kids in my school. We used to play tennis. There was 6 kids, I think, in my class alone. And we used to sit and talk. And I was always a little better than everybody else, when I was playing. And I remember sitting and having conversations and we were writing those, you used to get those notes that friends used to exchange with these friendship books. I don't know what they're even called. Yeah, slam books. And you used to write, what's your dream? And you're like, I want to be number one in the world at tennis. And all 6 girls used to write that, and I used to write that too. And that's really a memory that flashed by me when that happened. So it is literally a dream that comes true for very, very few people, to being number one at what they do at anything, any career that they choose. So yeah, I would say that moment probably. Rights and wrongs and do's and don'ts for women are a lot more than they are for men. And no matter what a woman is achieving in their career or whatever path they've chosen, I feel that in society they are truly considered as settled and really good to go only when they have that normalcy of society of being married and having kids. And there are many women who get married and don't want to have kids. There are many women that don't want to get married. Does that make them less settled? And if yes, then does the same thing happen for the man? Does that make him less settled if he's choosing the same thing? So these are questions that are so, they're very basic, for you and I, but they're not as basic for the normal sort of society, because that's the society that we live in, and it's so deeply engraved in us that women are, these are certain things women are supposed to do in order for them to be settled. Then I feel that if women like me, who are in this position where, a few people are listening to us, or even like we have the platform to talk, regardless of whether somebody is listening or not. I feel like if we are also not speaking, then we have no chance. So I feel that a lot of young girls and women can resonate with that when they see something that is so thought-provoking, because of the very fact that we go through it on a daily basis. We question, as soon as you're turning 24, 25, like, when you're going to get married, and then you're like, no, not yet. And they're like, oh, but like, all the good guys are going to go away, as if like that is the only achievement that there is in life. Like, what is a good guy? Like, I mean, what does that even mean, right? He gets very excited that sometimes when there's something coming on TV when I'm playing, and then like, he's a huge football fan, so he's like a Ronaldo fan, and the other day we were sitting and watching, there was a match going on, and then he was like, he will not sit for more than 2 minutes unless there's a football match going on. And he sat there for 90 minutes or whatever, 100 minutes because of everything. And he sat there, and he didn't go to school the next day because it was late. It was at 8 p.m. And my sister, and he said to my sister, he said, Ansiku, Ronaldo's the GOAT, he said. And so my sister said, your mom was the GOAT. He said, yeah, but she was a GOAT at tennis. He's a GOAT at football. So he's very aware that things like that do happen. And I feel that that is something that he'll carry forward with him in his life forward, with, the woman that he meets, and knowing that, every person is equal.
Товарищ Верховный Главнокомандующий флотом адмирал Евменов.
From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
We're beating Biden.
How dare he say that?
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on Firstpost America. Hello and welcome to Firstpost America, your global pit stop for the latest news and headlines from the United States and around the world. I'm Eric Ham, coming to you live from the nation's capital in Washington, D.C. We'll get you a roundup of all the day's top stories, but first, let's take a look at the headlines. In Lebanon, Iran-backed Hezbollah says it launched over 100 rockets at Israeli military positions. This in retaliation for a strike on the eastern part of the country. Beijing says it has indisputable sovereignty over islands in the South China Sea. This after the Philippines refused to consider China's concept paper on the dispute. Russia, China, and Iran began joint Navy drills in the Gulf of Oman. The three allies say the exercises are focused on protection of maritime economic activity. Germany's train drivers union announces a sixth round of strikes in a long-running dispute over working hours and pay. Frustrated commuters accuse the union of blackmail. The four-member SpaceX Crew 7 complete their nearly 6-month mission aboard the International Space Station with a splashdown off the coast of Florida. We begin with stunning news coming from the Caribbean. Haiti's Prime Minister Ariel Henry has submitted his resignation. The embattled Prime Minister will step down to make way for a transition council and a temporary replacement.
After the Council of Ministers tonight accepted to put into place a transitional presidential council, the members of the council will be picked after agreement with different sectors of the national life. The government I am running will remove itself immediately after the establishment of the said council.
Now the announcement comes after the envoys from Caribbean nations held an emergency meeting in Jamaica over the crisis in Haiti. The Caribbean Community, or CARICOM, has outlined the steps for Haiti once Prime Minister Henry steps down.
The Transitional Presidential Council will swiftly select and appoint an interim Prime Minister. The Transitional Presidential Council will, together with the interim Prime Minister, appoint an inclusive Council of Ministers. The Transitional Presidential Council will hold the relevant and possible powers of the Haitian presidency during the transition period until an elected government is established.
The U.S. has also come out in support of Prime Minister Henry's resignation. In fact, during the meeting with leaders from the Caribbean, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken pledged an additional $200 million in aid for Haiti. Washington has also offered Prime Minister Henry the choice to continue staying in Puerto Rico, citing the risk of returning to his homeland.
Given this increasingly urgent need, I'm announcing today that the United States Department of Defense is doubling its approved support for the mission from $100 million to $200 million. And that brings the total U.S. support to $300 million for this effort. I'm also announcing additional humanitarian assistance for the people of Haiti, $33 million to further support their health and food security.
As gangs in Haiti continue with their attacks on government institutions, Kenya has agreed to expedite the process to deploy its security officials in Port-au-Prince. Now, this stems from a recent agreement between Kenyan President William Ruto and Haiti's outgoing Prime Minister Ariel Henry.
status is as you know it. There was a small court matter. That small matter has been resolved because the court said we needed to have a reciprocal agreement with Haiti. That reciprocal agreement has already been signed about a week ago. So we are now in the pre-deployment stage. The standard operation procedures are in place, and Kenyan police officers will be just part of the multinational security mission in Haiti. Kenya is the lead nation, but there are so many other countries that have pledged to contribute troops. And this came from the mandate of the United Nations Security Council. So it's part of our international obligations.
Meanwhile, former cop turned gang leader Jimmy Chirizier has warned against the deployment of international forces in Haiti. The gang leader says that any presence of international troops will lead to a bloody revolution. Chirizier added that the foreign nations had already meddled in Haiti's internal matters for far too long, and it was now up to the people of Haiti to decide their next leader.
We demand that the choice of the person who is going to lead this country we live in will be made by the Haitian people. We want to make sure the person who is going to lead this country's wife and children live in Haiti. Today, we are taking this opportunity to ask the international community to give Haiti a chance. Because in the situation it's in right now, it's up to us Haitians to decide who can govern the country and what kind of government we want, and how we are going to work to get the country out of the misery it's in.
With Prime Minister Henry stepping down, there is still a long way to go before peace can be secured. Gang leaders are eyeing the corridors of the National Palace as a power vacuum forms. Meanwhile, the deployment of an internationally led security mission is likely to begin soon. This comes as hundreds of thousands of Haitians remain displaced. Haiti's future remains unclear, and the next leader is also in doubt. We'll stay abreast of developments as Chirizier plots his next move. And from the Caribbean to the Middle East, Israel has targeted Hamas #3 in an airstrike. The Israeli military bombed the Al-Nusret refugee camp in central Gaza following intelligence about the location of a senior Hamas leader. Israel now has not confirmed the success of the strike. Its target was military leader Marwan Issa. Reports say he may have died while hiding in a building in a refugee camp. So far, Hamas has neither confirmed nor refuted the reports. If his death in fact is confirmed, he will be the highest ranking official from Hamas killed by Israel during this war.
This evening, I would like to refer to reports over the past 24 hours regarding the elimination of seniors in the Gaza Strip. We are still examining the results of the attack and are yet to receive a final confirmation about it. It is still important to update that on the night between Saturday, March 9th and Sunday, March 10th, in a joint operation by the IDF and Shin Bet, warplanes attacked an underground compound of Hamas seniors. In central Gaza Strip in the area of Nuseirat, the compound was used by two of the organization's seniors. Marwan Issa, who is Mohammad Deif's deputy and one of the planners of the October 7 massacre. Marwan Issa is part of the central terror triangle in the Gaza Strip that includes also Mohammad Deif and Yahya Sinwar.
שמורכב גם ממוחמד דף ויחיא סנוואר.
In a video, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu alluded to the IDF operation. Netanyahu said Israel had killed Hamas' fourth-ranked leader in an alleged drone strike in January in Lebanon. Now Israel is targeting the remaining three of Hamas leadership.
אנחנו בדרך לניצחון המוחלט. בדרך לניצחון הזה חיסלנו כבר את מספר 4 בחמאס, ו3, 2 ו1 בדרך. כולם בני מוות, אנחנו נגיע לכולם.
59-year-old Issa, Yahya Sinwar, who serves as Hamas head in Gaza, and Mohammed Deif, the group's supreme commander, are all in Israel's crosshairs. Israel says these three form the terror triangle in Gaza. Now, Issa has long been a high-value target of Israel's for significant roles carrying out a string of terror attacks, starting from the time of the first Intifada and all the way up to October 7th. Now, he survived multiple assassination attempts. In fact, in March of last year, Issa delivered a speech calling for Palestinians in the West Bank and East Jerusalem to lead the confrontation against Israeli occupation. In the same address, he warned that a quake would hit the region soon. Now, Issa has participated in a series of secret meetings in Egypt on prisoner release. He also played a central role in the Gilad Shalit deal, where over 1,000 Palestinian prisoners were released in exchange for one Israeli soldier. And staying in the Middle East, tensions continue to rise in the Red Sea. The Yemen-based Houthi rebels fired multiple missiles at commercial ships passing through the Bab el-Mandab Strait. The Houthis claimed that they successfully struck an American-flagged ship named Pinocchio.
The Yemeni armed forces have confirmed that they will continue to prevent Israeli navigation or these ships heading to the ports of occupied Palestine in the Red and Arabian Seas until the aggression stops and the siege on the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip is lifted.
The U.S. Central Command did in fact confirm that the Houthis launched missiles at a commercial ship which was Liberian and not American. U.S. forces also confirmed that the missiles did not impact any commercial vessel in the Red Sea. However, after the Houthi attacks, retaliatory strikes were launched across Yemen. Fighter jets from the United States and the United Kingdom dropped bombs on 6 targets, destroying Houthi naval vessels and missile sites. Yemen's internationally recognized government has confirmed the airstrikes claimed the lives of at least 11 people while wounding an additional 14. Despite the airstrikes, the Iran-backed Houthis say they will increase their offensive during the holy month of Ramadan.
The Yemeni armed forces confirmed that their military operations will be escalated with the help of Allah the Almighty during the month of Ramadan, the month of jihad, in support of the oppressed Palestinian people and for our Mujahideen brothers in the Gaza Strip.
Meanwhile, the Houthis have recruited thousands of civilians into their ranks. The recruits were made to participate in a 12-week military training program as part of their orientation. They also pledged to wage a war against the United States, the UK, and Israel. The newly enlisted men were then paraded in Yemen's capital, Sana'a, in a massive show of Houthi strength.
We came here to witness the readiness and alertness against tyranny, against the arrogance of US, UK and Israelis, and in support for our brothers in Gaza and Palestine. We came here to witness the graduates of the training course Al-Aqsa floods. This is the official rush and general mobilization against God's enemies, to send a message to them that whatever they do, we will be there for them and ready in support for our brothers in Gaza and Palestine.
These latest attacks from the Houthis come just days after they launched a fatal attack on another commercial ship that killed 4 civilians. Now, Western efforts to stop the Houthis haven't been successful. Meanwhile, private ships continue to brave the risky waters of the Red Sea. Russia is getting ready for a presidential election, and Vladimir Putin is certain to win. The 2024 election will hand Putin another 6-year term, making him the longest-serving Kremlin chief since Joseph Stalin. But just 3 days ahead of the vote, Moscow has made claims of meddling. Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service has accused Washington of interference, claiming that President Joe Biden is plotting a cyber attack on Russian online voting systems. Our next report explains.
With just 3 days to go for presidential elections in Russia, Moscow has accused the United States of meddling. Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service says Washington has plans to target its online voting systems by launching a major cyber attack. Russia's SVR Foreign Intelligence Service also says US President Joe Biden has tasked American NGOs to achieve a decrease in voter turnout in Russian elections. Despite these claims of meddling and interference, even this year, the Russian presidential elections are fairly predictable, with no twists and turns and no competition. President Vladimir Putin is certain to win. This will be Putin's 6th term as president, and it will make him the longest-serving Kremlin chief since Joseph Stalin. He faces virtually no opposition, though there are 3 other candidates in the fray. Nikolai Kharitonov, a 75-year-old member of Russia's lower house of parliament. Leonid Slutsky, leader of the Nationalist Liberal Democratic Party. And 40-year-old Vladislav Davankov, deputy chairman of the lower house of parliament. But all of them are backed by the Kremlin, so essentially it is Putin versus dummies. Putin, however, is facing dissent. Leading the protest is Alexei Navalny's widow, Yulia Navalny. She has called for a massive election day protest against Putin. She vows to carry forward her late husband's mission. Alexei Navalny was one of Putin's fiercest critics. On February the 16th, he died mysteriously in an Arctic prison where he was serving a 3-decade jail term.
We can still use that so-called election against Putin and use it to achieve our goals. Alexei himself told us how to do it. We need to use the election day to show that we exist and there are many of us. We are real, we are alive, and we exist. We are against Putin. We need to come to the polling station on the same day and time, noon of March 17. It is up to you to choose what to do next. You can vote for any candidate but Putin. You can spoil the ballot. You can write on it in big letters, Navalny.
Russia boasts of a vast electorate. Over 112 million people will vote in presidential elections that are scheduled from May 15th to May 17th. Another 1.9 million people abroad also have the right to vote. A remote online voting system will also be available for the very first time. This year, voting will also take place in annexed territories of Ukraine that are now controlled by Moscow's forces and have been placed under Russian law. Around 70 to 80 million people usually exercise their right to vote in Russia. In 2018, the voter turnout was 67.5%. Vladimir Putin was first appointed acting president in 1999. In the year 2000, he won the presidential election with 53% of the vote. In 2004, the support for Putin went up to 71.3%. In 2008, Dmitry Medvedev ran for president and Putin served as prime minister. In 2012, he was back as president with 63.6% of the vote. And in 2018, he won the presidential election with 76.7% of the vote. This will be Vladimir Putin's 6th term. So how long can a Russian president rule? The 1993 Russian constitution specified that a president could only serve 2 terms of 4 years if they were back-to-back. In 2008, the presidential term was extended to 6 years after amendments. 2020 saw more amendments that formally reset Putin's own presidential term tally to 0 from 2024, potentially allowing him to remain in power until 2036. The West casts Putin as a war criminal and a dictator. The Kremlin says despite the West's opinions, Putin enjoys an overwhelming support and that Russia does not want to be lectured by the West about democracy. The Russian president maintains a robust approval rating of around 85%. This unwavering support suggests that Putin's return to the presidency is all but certain, and the election results which will inaugurate the winner in May will be a testimony to it.
And now from elections in Russia to elections in the United States. The race for the White House is picking up. And former president and Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump has found perhaps his biggest MAGA supporter. However, he is not from a key battleground state, nor is he a member of the campaign team, at least not officially. In fact, he's all the way from the heart of Europe. It's none other than his longtime ally, Viktor Orban. The Hungarian Prime Minister says Donald Trump has a detailed plan to end the war in Ukraine. Our next report takes you inside their most recent meeting.
The 2024 US presidential race is gaining steam, and so is former President Donald Trump's campaign. Unprecedented support for Trump has not only been seen in Republican primaries, but also across the Atlantic in the heart of Europe, where his longtime ally Viktor Orban is backing his bid to return to the White House.
There are great opportunities ahead of us. The world political scene at the end of the year will have a completely different picture than it is at the beginning of the year. And if God helps us, Hungary's room for maneuvering will not decrease, but will expand to the extent we have seen in the past. We can't get involved in another country's elections, but we would really like President Donald Trump to return to the presidency and make peace here in the eastern half of Europe.
The far-right Hungarian Prime Minister met Trump at his residence in Palm Beach, Florida. The focus of their discussion, apart from Trump's rerun, was the war in Ukraine. According to Orban, Trump, who he calls a man of peace, has a detailed plan to end the Ukraine war, which began 2 years ago. Orban says Trump won't give a penny to Ukraine if he's re-elected president, which would end the war as Kyiv cannot stand on its own feet. The Hungarian Prime Minister said that if Americans don't give money, the Europeans alone can't finance the war. He also said during Trump's presidency there was peace in the Middle East and peace in Ukraine, and that there would be no war if he was still the President of the United States. Both Trump and Orban have long shown deference and enthusiasm for Russian President Vladimir Putin. Orban has been solidifying Hungary's ties with Russia despite international pressure. He was the first leader to meet Putin in person after the Ukraine war began. With a warm handshake, he expressed Budapest's eagerness to expand cooperation with Moscow. Orban has also refused to supply Ukraine with weapons. Recently, Trump also suggested that if re-elected, he would encourage Russia to attack all US allies he deemed not to contribute enough to the NATO alliance.
I came in, I made a speech, and I said, you got to pay up. They asked me that question. One of the presidents of a big country stood up and said, well, sir, if we don't pay and we're attacked by Russia, will you protect us? I said, you didn't pay? You're delinquent? He said, yes, let's say that happened. No, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want. You got to pay. You got to pay your bills. And the money came flowing in. And
US President Joe Biden condemned these remarks as dumb, shameful, and un-American. He has accused Trump of bowing down to Russia.
Former president has sent a dangerous and shockingly, frankly, un-American signal to the world. Just a few days ago, Trump gave an invitation to Putin to invade some of our allies, NATO allies. He said if an ally didn't spend enough money on defense, he would encourage Russia to, quote, do whatever the hell they want, end of quote. Can you imagine a former president of the United States saying that? The whole world heard it. The worst thing is he means it. No other president in our history has ever bowed down to a Russian dictator. Well, let me say this as clearly as I can. I never will. For God's sake, it's dumb, it's shameful, it's dangerous, it's un-American.
Joe Biden also took a jibe at Orban and Trump's meeting, saying that the Hungarian Prime Minister is looking for a dictatorship.
I can tell you a lot about a person who he keeps company with. And yesterday he was hosting at his club Viktor Orban, who says he doesn't think democracy works. Call him a fantastic leader. Seriously. He's been sucking up to win him. Anyway. To want to build dictators and authoritarian thugs all around the world. He said the North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un wrote him a beautiful letter. He bragged about calling Xi Jinping a king. He called Putin and he said, do whatever the hell you want to our allies. I'm not making these quotes up. When he says he wants to be a dictator, I believe him. But I don't want to get carried away here.
While Trump is certain to be the Republican presidential nominee, European leaders are nervous about another term for him as the US president, because this would mean waning US support for both Ukraine and NATO.
That's all we have time for today. We hope to see you right back here tomorrow at the same time. Thanks so much for watching. From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
We're beating Biden.
How dare he say that?
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage.